Welcome to Own Your Zone. My name is Janan Glasgow-George, and Own Your Zone is a conversation about how companies can differentiate their businesses from the pack, provide unique value, and craft a competitive advantage in rapidly growing markets by leveraging intellectual property and IP data trends. I'm going to be sharing tips on how to own your zone. You can't own your zone if you can't deliver your product in the marketplace. The value of supply chain has never been more illuminated than it has been this past year because of interruptions connected to the pandemic and rollouts of vaccine and medical supplies. Today, I'm interviewing one of the global leading experts on supply chain and an expert in leveraging data, Irfan Khan. Irfan is an innovator and visionary leader transforming the way data insights are garnered and implemented across healthcare, technology, manufacturing, financial services, and other sectors. He is the CEO and president of CLOUDSUFI, a leading data products and services company. Irfan has led the company to triple-digit growth in 2020, despite the impact of coronavirus pandemic. Irfan is a contributor for Forbes and Fast Company and previously served on the Wall Street Journal CEO Council. He's appeared in the likes of Inc. and Huffington Post, focusing conversations on business growth and innovation. In his 22 years of leadership experience in large and mid-sized organizations, Irfan has led leadership roles at the $21 billion Mahindra-backed company Bristlecone, where he served as president and CEO, as well as Microsoft Hughes Software, where he successfully led organizational changes and process improvement in markets all across Americas, Europe, Middle East, and Asia. But his work with CLOUDSUFI has included founding the CLOUDSUFI Foundation, a program that offers 70-year-olds and older opportunities to learn new skills, earn income, and contribute to society. Irfan, welcome to the show. Let's start with a few questions about your career in working in supply chain. You're obviously a leading expert in supply chain. Talk about your work moving into that, your work at Bristlecone, and your work today at CLOUDSUFI.
So let me give you my answers. For us, for me, the journey for the last 2 decades, more than 2 decades, been interesting. Came from infrastructure satellite world, moved to the software, and then moved to hardware, and then did a startup in the Valley, and then moved to a bigger brands like Microsoft, and then started working for a company which was 30 people, and ended up being the CEO and president of the company, and then decided to do something of my own, which is CLOUDSUFI. So an interesting mix of experiences, but the most exciting part about the journey is what's happening right now, which is CLOUDSUFI, and that's where we are, doing really well and making sure we are able to impact lives in a manner which I always wanted to. So, but happy to be there on this call.
Thank you so much. I know when we think about supply chain, most of the time people consider products or components, but supply chain is really significantly also about people and data, right?
Yes, it is. I mean, a supply chain can transcend from enterprise to even our human lives. So, and data, yes, plays a critical role on supply chain. Absolutely, Janan.
I know that you have been, from time to time, quoted as saying that supply chain is like a symphony. Can you tell us what you mean by that?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at anything which needs to make music, and as we say, we're going to make the enterprise data dance, which is our theme line, is fundamentally you cannot interpret instruments, but you can interpret music, right? And if I take that analogy to the world of data, right? You've seen me saying a few times that data is the new oxygen for us, right? And the reason is you need that oxygen to breathe. In fact, it's time to advance the narrative from calling data the new oil. We used to call it data as the new oil before, to crowning it to the new oxygen, right? And the reason is very simple. Oxygen, just like data, think about it, right? Represents an omnipresent, more basic and vital element of survival, right, than oil. I mean, I can say, and you can survive without oil. We cannot survive without oxygen right now.
Right.
Now, if you now further extend it, it's not just the oxygen, it's the timeliness and the quantity and the access to that oxygen which makes the human survive. Very similar from a data perspective. It's the timeliness of data and the necessary data at the right time, as I said, will make enterprise survive. And not just enterprise, in our daily life, it survives right now. So for us. So for us, it's very clear to make sure that we are not just giving you data. We're not just giving you intelligent data. We're giving you intelligent data at the right time. And then on top of that, you extrapolate to every day of your life. If you don't get anything on right time, especially in terms of data, today you can't even function. You can't go out of the house. You cannot even talk to your kids. You cannot advise somebody as in your peers. You can't even talk to your own partner if you really don't have timely data and information around you. So I think that brings the importance of why data is the new oxygen.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I love the analogy. And I guess when we think about timeliness, I mean, we're thinking about not having latency, but there's always some element of time in data analytics, isn't there? Talk a little bit about why the timing and the analytics of the data can be important as well.
I mean, I'll give you an example of the U.S. healthcare system, right? I mean, then we are going deeper in the healthcare space, and it seems to be the reason we chose that space is the best way to impact the human life. Besides the fact that whole segment is still in the Stone Age right now, we really have to revive it, right? Look at U.S. healthcare system. We have one of the best healthcare system, but one of the most expensive. Everybody cannot access to it. The supply chain, demand versus supply, right, or planning versus execution is completely isolated and broken right now, right? Mm-hmm. There is nobody who's triangulating pieces together saying, what do we need versus what do we have, either in terms of what you need in the hospital or clinic or nursing facilities or your own homes. Not to forget the fact most of the time they don't even have an idea about what they would need looking at the trends which are coming in, right? Then think about the biggest challenge which most of the companies ignore today because of lack of data. Doctors, everybody's focusing on patients, but nobody's looking at the physician fatigue, which to me is super important. The people who really cure, right? The really real rock star of our healthcare world, who are actually nurses and doctors. They're running on very limited data, and the actual data has not been provided at the right time, which is unstructured. Like Jinan's not well, she has a headache, her blood pressure is high, she comes to a doctor, and the doctor gives her a pill to reduce her blood pressure, period, done. The doctor does not have a data for the last 2 months. She's not even slept more than 3 hours. He has no data about her lifestyle. He has no data about certain stress going in her life, which might be inducing that blood pressure. So he doesn't want to pop up. He doesn't have to pop a pill. He could make some other changes in Jinan's life to really cure that. Think about the big gap. People go to a doctor's office, they get 15 minutes, they give them, in 15 minutes, I'm supposed to know you. I'm supposed to predict your life, which is your health. And then I'm supposed to get out because I only have 15 minutes. So think about what fatigue the physicians, and you can't blame the physicians because they have limited data. They cannot be productive. How can we give them structured and unstructured data? And not to forget the famous things which I talked about, the telehealth we're talking about. Then the dimension beyond that, Jinan, which is around clinical trials right now, where how do we compress clinical trials? You saw what happened in COVID right now. The very fact we can collapse the time to bring a medicine to save so many lives would not be possible if data was not at the right place and the right mathematical models were not put to test to collapse that point right now. So all these aspects clearly shown that unless we have the data and the timeliness data, nothing's going to happen. And that's when, I mean, of course, analytics and other things are a tool to that right now. But I keep focusing and zeroing in two things. It's about timeliness and the simplicity of data. I And how, if it's not there, I think it's difficult to survive.
So expand on that a little bit more, if you can. How is your CloudSUFI platform and your operations supporting that timeliness of data? And do you see a solution that allows people, patients as well as doctors, to have access to the data they need to make better choices?
So think about it, right? I mean, there are lots of platforms. We're not the only game in town, but there are very few, I would say I can count them on the fingers, a platform which are solving multi-dimensional problems. What are multiple dimensional problems? Remember the 6 things I said, is the US, which we are missing right now. Super expensive. How do you make it cheap? Unresponsive. How do you make it response? How do you triangulate to bridge the gap between the demand and supply and bring predictability right now? How do you reduce physicians' fatigue, right? How do you induct telehealth into this? And then how do you make sure that you take that same platform and collapse the time to bring medicines to market? There's not a single game in town which has all these features. And there's so much I can disclose as the platform is still getting rolled out. But I think there is very few, I would say maybe 1 or 2, as I said, who are even making that attempt to do it. And we are way ahead in that game. And that's when I think there's an element of pride with the CloudSUFI team saying, we're going to bring something which people haven't seen it. And that also solves the 6, 7 problem, which really impacts our human life immediately. So that's how the platform could be nicely differentiated. But a lot of stuff needs to be rolled out. And the engines are still churning behind the wheels.
Yeah, you have a great team and a growing team, I'm sure. As you know, some of our focus here on this Own Your Zone podcast is to talk a little bit about your differentiation from competitors in the market. What really gives you an advantage in terms of that differentiation in CloudSUFI?
I think the focus and the simplicity in which we're going to solve these 6, 7 dimensions is the biggest differentiator we have. The company was built around solving a problem. The company was built around making sure that we are looking at the problem first, and then we are saying, okay, how do we build a solution around it right now to do it? So I think the biggest differentiation is this platform. And again, we just don't only have platform, we also have a services division, right? Because you cannot solve everybody's problem by giving them a pill, right? Sometimes you cannot give them a pill, and you really want to make sure they change their lifestyle. To change their lifestyle, there's a whole services division of CloudSUFI, which goes in and solves very customizable problem which needs a lot of handholding, and you cannot box the problem as a product and give it to them. So it's both the divisions A and B right now. All right, the division A solves the unstructured problem, purely services, and division B goes after the product to do that right now. But both of them have a common objective, just to make sure that your supply chain, right, is aligned at the back, and you are able to reduce the gap. And that's important when I say one of our vision is we want to reduce the gap between human intuitions and database decision. No company does that. So human intuitions and database decisions, right? And we go through all our lives. We make decisions based on our gut, and then we don't have any data to substantiate it. Some of them get so good at believing in our gut and we move forward. I'm one of them, right? But I try to back it up with the data, and I'm trying to bring that timeliness of backup. That means I don't like this person, or I don't think this person could be productive for me, and I have equal amount of data to prove that he is not really productive. For a doctor, there's a patient which seems to be quite ill, but my gut tells me that it's a lot to do with not his problem, but the lifestyle he's living right now. And can I have unstructured data to back me up? I think if I can blend these 2 gaps, I think we are rock stars. And that's where we're heading to.
Yeah, I see that as a common theme across industries. As you know, we look at patent data, but we're also working with individual inventions. So it seems that things are very differentiated and unique as a competitive advantage. And yet we have to have data that confirms that as well. So the data backing intuition makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, Gina. And if you look at our habits if you look at corporates, businesses, successful entrepreneurs like you, we keep looking for data to substantiate the same data we have. So we've got structured data, which is coming in a structured form. And then we start looking at analysis report. We look at the big analyst throwing their weights around in terms of this is right. So all validation on structured data. Nobody's touching the unstructured data. There's no validation of unstructured data, right? And that validation, if you can bring it to real life and legitimize it in the society, I think the decision-making capability of people will become much better. We'll make less mistakes, right? Or even if you make mistakes, we know the exact reasons for making a mistake, so we can fix it, right? I think that's a very interesting space we are targeting right now. And I think as we go deeper, I'm so convinced. And when I say I'm speaking both from my perspective and my co-founder, Zeba Vakil. We're trying to make sure that we're very convinced that this is the right direction to do it. It's not very fancy. It's not very glamorous. But once we nail this thing down, which we are, I think we would be somebody who can help everyone, just not the Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000.
Superb. We're looking forward to how you roll that out for sure. I'd like to ask, I almost have the impression that the data has a life of its own, almost like the data is a living organism itself. Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, it's like a child, right? I mean, data also matures over a period of time. So yes, a child, I could say, has a stage which is 0 to 5, and then 5 to 10, or 10 to 15. Let's just put the three boxes. But you will be getting new data, but the past data, which is coming from the behavior, from his interest, from or her interest, or his strength and weaknesses, it just gets reinforced as the time. So I would say data has a timestamp, but data has time frame for that time you need it to make a decision. Data is always crucial. So, but when we move to the next time slot, then you need more data around it right now to do it. So it's a vicious cycle. It's not or I would say it's a continuous cycle, not a vicious cycle. But you have to always keep enriching the data all the time, and that's why it's so important to make sure that there's a platform, there's a service provider which could not just saying, okay, what do you have is junk, and let's reproduce everything, but how do you enrich it, and then enrich it on the right time?
Yeah,
that's important.
Absolutely. I've heard you speak on the concept of antifragility. You've spoken about the healthcare system today on this podcast. Talk about the concept of anti-fragile as it applies to the healthcare system.
I think it's a very interesting time the last 2 years, and it's a big example of either we could come out of this pandemic by being stronger. That means your supply chain actually learns from all the shocks we've had, right? And all the experiences you have right now, and become much more stronger. And that's anti-fragility. Fundamentally, you're not, it's not rigidity, or it's not how strong your supply chains are. It's a question of, can that shock, or which we call it the black swan event, which is disruption of everything around it, which is the norm right now to do it. Whenever something disrupts, the supply chain absorbs the learnings and becomes stronger. That's the concept of anti-fragility. Supply chain has been used for a long time now. In fact, I've been personally advocating it for the last, I would say, a decade. And the reason is because if you don't do that, then, as I said, this is not one pandemic we're going to have. This will happen again. It's not, and I know it's sad to say when you say it will happen again. There could be other pandemic which could happen. It could be power grids going down. It could be, it's a whole different set of problem which happens as the civilization moves from one generation to the other one right now, right? The only way we're going to survive it is have an anti-fragile system where at any point of time, you're not dependent on a single point of failure. You have multiple points of failures, number one, and then you're able to absorb the experiences, the shock, which could only happen again if you have timeliness data being given to you to react, time to react right now to do it. And there have been several examples where companies have actually followed and have come out of this so-called black swan event very successfully. So I've always been a very strong supporter of saying we have to be anti-fragile, not just for the running companies, but to be honest, in your own life, you've got to be. Every shock is a new learning right now. It cannot be, oh, I'm jolted out, or I don't know what to do. right now. So I look at this as an opportunity to learn. Of course, we could have learned it without losing so many people, but it's an opportunity to learn that this could happen again and what we need to do differently next time. And if we can't learn it, the system is not anti-fragile. I think that's important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is great advice for entrepreneurs and business leaders alike. Do you have any other advice for business leaders as they try to kind of own their space and differentiate to have competitive advantage? How do they own their zone?
I mean, you yourself is a fairly successful entrepreneur, so I'm sure you can answer that better, but let me give it a shot. I mean, I always say that, I mean, if you look at from our long-term and short-term goals right now, I love what this quote, which Andrew Carnegie says, that if you want to be happy, set a goal that commands your thoughts, liberates your energy, and inspires your hopes, right? So for us, when we were founding CloudSufi, and there were a lot of questions being asked to me, okay, what's your short term? What's your long term goal? What's your fiscal goals, right? And we're growing fast. We're growing at 9x or 10x year on year, which is financially on a Excel sheet looks great, which is not, which was always when we put a good team and have a good experience and a good focus, things can happen, right? But for us, I think the short term goal, which is important for any entrepreneur, is how you're going to be relevant to two people, two communities. And it's the order of priorities. First is your own employees, and second, your customers and partners. How do you become relevant? I think that relevancy sometimes gets missed because most of us gets enamored by the fact, oh, I'm going to build a unicorn, right? Or I want top 5 VCs investing into you, right? And in my mind, that is a byproduct and good to have, or sometimes not good to have right now. Sometimes actually, if you don't time it right, it's bad to have. You get VCs way early, then you've already figured out how to being healthy.
Mm-hmm.
It might backfire, right? You want to be a unicorn before you even build a world-class company. Wrong notions to do it right now. You're doing things for the relevancy of the employees and the relevancies of the customer and partners are key. Our long term is very clearly, as I said, we have taken a nice challenging task because we would be really bored to do something easy. We said that we really want to reduce the gap between human intuitions and data-based decisions, data-backed decisions, right? I think that gap, very few people have even attempted to solve it right now. And the very fact we are doing it and we're going to do it, right? It takes time. It's not easy. But what's the fun of solving a problem which is not easy right now? I think those two short-term, long-term goals needs to be well articulated. And secondly, you've got to do something, as I said, commands your thoughts and it liberates your energy and inspires your hopes right now, right? So you put all of them in a single bucket, you're going to have a world-class company.
I can see that you have joy in what you're doing.
It's a lot of fun right now. Sometimes too much joy. I ignore other things, but I think, and it's all about having a good team. You've got a right mix of people in the team and right blend of people. Most of them are actually better than me in what they do. So they keeps me on my toes. Awesome. And yeah, it's a journey. It's never going to be easy, but when will you last? I'm sure when you started your practice, your first few years were never easy, right? You could have been a good corporate lawyer somewhere and doing a 9 to 5. You chose a completely unconventional path, and then you're having fun. So it's just about, again, as I said, you need to have fun. You really have to inspire yourself and others.
I can see that you bring that to what you're doing. And as you're growing a team, and I hope that our audience will want to connect with you, we certainly thank you for joining us today. But tell us how people can reach you. What's the best way?
My CloudSufi.com. It's CloudSufi.com is a website, and and that's the best way to reach us. And again, my email is Irfan at CloudSufi. So it's very simple. And or LinkedIn, social media, and we always looking for, as I said, meeting relevant people and who could be relevant to us and could be relevant to our journey. So yes, feel free to reach out. We'd love to talk to you.
Thank you. I always enjoy talking with you, Irfan. Good to see you.
Thank you, Janan. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. My name is Janan Glasgow-George, and Own Your Zone is a conversation about how companies can differentiate their businesses from the pack, provide unique value, and craft a competitive advantage in rapidly growing markets by leveraging intellectual property and IP data trends. I'm going to be sharing tips on how to own your zone